Blood danced on the dust like dying embers, stirred by the wind that howled across the broken plains of Caer Thalera, world ruled not by laws, but by steel, fire, and fear. The sun hung low, fat, and crimson, casting an otherworldly glow upon the jagged black stone walls of the Citadel of Flame, seat of the ruling queen. Inside the throne hall, where banners made of flayed war standards swayed above pillars scorched by old wars, Queen Elizabeth stood in silence. Her presence alone was enough to stop the heart of a charging bull. She was tall, muscular, yet elegant, a barbarian sculpted by years of war and courtly betrayal. Her red hair flowed in wild braids laced with metal rings, each one signifying a war won or a rival beheaded. Scars mapped her arms like old battle hymns, and her eyes green as storm-forged. Jade seemed to pierce through bone and soul. Her armor was nothing like the ornamental shells worn by the sycophantic rulers of other planets. No, hers was a hybrid of molten steel and bone plate, beaten into shape by the dying smiths of the Ursari dunes. A red velvet cape, torn from the robes of the high priest of Kalos, swirled behind her. Before her knelt the last of the high elders, a man who once tried to poison her with words dipped in honey. Now he spat blood and dust, his fate sealed. "You dare speak of peace, Velgor," Elizabeth hissed, her voice thick with a wild, regal power. "Peace is the lullaby sung by cowards before they're slaughtered in their sleep." Her blade, Vaithine, an obsidian greatsword said to drink the essence of its victims, rested against her throne. But she didn't need it. Her words alone flayed the old man's pride. "You've ruled long enough with silence and ceremony," she continued, walking slowly, boots echoing like thunder. "I was born in fire, raised in blood. I am the storm that tears down false gods." She raised her hand, not to strike, but to let him breathe in the knowledge of his end. Outside, the crowd roared. They didn't want peace. They didn't want order. They wanted Queen Elizabeth, the flame rod, to burn the heavens if need be. She was not just their ruler. She was their fury given form. Moments later, the elder's head was hoisted on a pike, his final breath forgotten in the roaring chant of the masses. Long live the Crimson Queen! But as Elizabeth turned from the balcony and strode back into the shadows of her citadel, her eyes were not on the crowd. Her gaze was on the stars above, the ones that still held secrets, whispers of an ancient power that had once ruled this world before the barbarian tribes even learned to speak. And she had begun to dream of it, again, of a voice older than suns, calling her name from the void. Elizabeth. Asterisk. The sun rose not with grace, but with a defiant glare over the scorched plains of Fandral, the capital of the barbarian kingdom. The land bore the wounds of old war-shattered spears, broken shields, and the forgotten bones of kings who once sought to challenge the Crimson Lioness, now seated upon the obsidian throne. Queen Elizabeth stood on the high terrace of her Blackstone, keep, her blood-red hair tangled by the rising winds. It was not adorned with gold or gems, but braided with silver cords and the teeth of conquered warlords. Her emerald eyes, sharp as obsidian knives, scanned the dust horizon beyond the outer palisade. She wore a battle kilt over thick leather greaves, her bare arms etched with war paint and the sacred tattoos of the mountain tribes. On her right hip rested her war axe, Gorhal, an heirloom passed through fire and betrayal. Behind her, the chieftains, gathered in silence, a semicircle of armored giants, loyalists, mercenaries, and former enemies bound to her by the iron chain of respect. They were waiting for her word. "The south is burning," said Wulfrin, her shield brother, his voice gravelly with age and war. "The fire-born riders have crossed the Varak hills again. They raid the grain stores, slit throats, and vanish into the sands." Elizabeth didn't flinch, Let them burn fields. Let them drink our blood. I want them to think they've broken our walls. Murmurs rippled through the circle. A trap, a retreat? But Elizabeth raised one hand, and silence returned. I have no interest in chasing phantoms on horseback, she continued, voice low and dangerous. Let them feast tonight, because tomorrow I'll ride into their camp myself. There was silence for a beat too long, then a slow, uneasy laugh from Tarnak the Boar, one of the oldest chieftains. You'll ride? Into their den? Without your warband? No, she said, turning. With my warband. With every damned son and daughter. Of Fandral willing to die for a queen who fights beside them. A roar erupted from the chamber. That night, under a crimson moon, the war drums echoed across the dark plains. Fires blazed atop the signal towers, and the warriors of the Queen's banner assembled under a sky smeared with ash and destiny. In the war tent, Wulfrin approached her, holding an iron flask and a weathered map. They'll expect a battle, Elizabeth, not an execution. She smirked, her fingers tracing the route through the canyons toward the Fireborn camp. Then let's show them what a red-haired queen can do with rage, steel, and the fury of her ancestors. And when she emerged into the torchlight, her armor adorned with the banner of a lion's skull, soaked in crimson, her warriors knelt not in fear, but in reverence. Elizabeth of Fandral wasn't just their queen. She was their vengeance. The throne room had always smelled of old blood and iron. It was a towering hall carved into the mountain's core, with obsidian columns stretching upward like blackened tree trunks, reaching toward a godless sky. Fires roared in braziers along. The walls, casting Elizabeth's crimson hair in a flickering glow that made her look less like a monarch and more like a vengeful spirit pulled from legend. She sat upon the throne of ash, carved from the bones of giants and rimmed with swords, offered by conquered kings. Her gaze was fixed not on her advisors, not on the trembling emissaries from border tribes, but on the great iron doors at the end of the hall. They were opening. Every soul in the room held their breath. What came through was not what any of them expected. The figure was cloaked, not in silk or steel, but in tattered cloth scorched black by fire. Beneath the hood, eyes glowed like embers. No, not eyes. Something else, something alien. The figure walked with unnatural grace, silent as falling ash. Who dares walk unannounced into my storm? Elizabeth's voice rang out. Her words were like an axe swung through air, sharp and unforgiving. The figure bowed. Then it spoke not aloud, but directly into the minds of everyone present. I am the fire that walks. I have come to deliver your doom, or your salvation. Gasps and murmurs erupted. Elizabeth stood, her armor catching the firelight like molten gold. Speak plainly, demon, she demanded. Do not hide behind riddles. The being lifted its hood. Where a face should have been, there was only flame, a living, swirling vortex of fire. The advisors stumbled back. Some drew weapons. One fled. Only Elizabeth remained unmoved. You have ruled with strength, the being said, its voice now echoing through the chamber like the crackle of a dying hearth. But a darkness is coming from the sky. Not one of your axes, nor the might of your warburn legions will stop it. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. I fear no darkness. Let it come. The fire being leaned closer, its flames reflecting in her eyes. You will, Crimson Queen, because this darkness does not come to conquer. It comes to consume, and the stars will fall before it. A silence settled, deeper than fear. Then Elizabeth raised her hand, slowly. Her guards tensed, but instead of ordering its execution, she offered it a warrior's gesture, a fist over her chest. Then I will burn brighter, and if the stars fall, I will rise among their ashes. The creature's flames flared, as if amused. "I see why they call you queen," it said. Then, with a hiss of vapor, it vanished, leaving behind only scorched stone and the faint scent of sulfur. Outside the hall, snow began to fall, black, tainted snow that sizzled where it touched stone. And far above the world, just beyond the veil of sight, something vast shifted, watching, waiting. The halls of Castle Ruther had grown quieter since the barbarian chieftains returned to their distant provinces, each brooding over Queen Elizabeth's refusal to wage immediate war on the southern kingdoms. The roaring hearths and clashing swords had given way to tense silence and wary glances. But beneath the calm stone facade of the castle, a deeper flame stirred, an old threat long buried in shadow. It began with a whisper. Late into the night, Elizabeth sat alone in her war chamber, red hair unbound, flowing like wildfire across her shoulders. Her eyes glinted against the torchlight as she stared at an ancient map etched on stretched deerskin. Her fingers traced the faded ink roots carved into the earth by warriors long dead. She sensed movement in the room before she heard it. The sound wasn't footsteps. It was colder, like a breeze carried on ash. Eliza. She stood, instantly, hand gripping the hilt of her ceremonial claymore. The room darkened. Flames flickered blue. "Show yourself," she commanded, her voice honed with regal fury. The wall near the fireplace, twisted stone bending like clay. From it emerged a figure cloaked in black, face veiled beneath a hood. Not a man, not a ghost. Something between. Its voice was a sigh made of smoke. "You wear the crown, but know little of the roots beneath your throne." Elizabeth didn't flinch. "Name yourself before I remove your tongue." "I am Mor Kadum, last speaker of the flame below." Her heart quickened, not in fear, but in recognition. That name had passed through northern lullabies as a monster, a demon, or worse, a traitor. The flame below, a name whispered in tales of betrayal and sealed tombs. "You're supposed to be dead." Mor Kadum tilted his head. "The dead are merely forgotten truths, and you, Queen of Flame, have forgotten much." He raised a hand, and the stone floor cracked open, revealing a seared cavern below glowing embers swirling in ancient patterns. Elizabeth peered into it. A vision took her memories, not her own. A city of fire beneath the mountain, once home to the flamebound, the first barbarians who danced with magma, shaped swords from liquid heat, and worshipped something that did not die. Elizabeth staggered back. "What is this?" "Your birthright," Mor Kadum whispered. "Your ancestors sealed the flame below to keep their power, to claim thrones of stone instead of fire. But now it wakes again, and it will demand blood. I rule this land. I will not bend to ancient myths or dead gods." "You already have," he replied, stepping into the firelight. His skin bore cracks of molten light, like lava coursed beneath his flesh. "Your blood sings with it. You are the last of the true flame-bearers. Without it, your war will fail." Elizabeth's fingers loosened on her sword. The war, the barbarians, hunger, the growing storm in the south. She looked into the fire again. Beneath it, the shape of a sleeping behemoth made not of flesh, but of burning stone shifted. "You want me to unseal it?" "I want you to reclaim what was stolen from your people." "And if I refuse?" Mor Kadum grinned, flames licking his teeth. "Then the south will devour you, and your kingdom will fall, just as the last Queen of Ashes fell, screaming into the magma she denied." For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Elizabeth drew a dagger and sliced her palm. Blood dripped into the fire. It hissed, not in pain, but in hunger. The pact was made. From the darkness below, something vast and ancient stirred. The wind howled across the obsidian plains of Dravora, as Queen Elizabeth led her royal guard through the desolate expanse. Above, the red sun burned like a bloodshot eye, casting long shadows behind their steeds. The terrain shifted subtly beneath. Them volcanic glass crackled beneath armored hooves, and the scent of ash and memory clung to the air. They had been riding for hours, chasing the whispers of a hidden relic, something spoken of only in murmurs within the deep vaults of the fortress library. Elizabeth had not rested in days. Her crimson hair was tousled by the wind, and her freckled face, once soft in youth, was now hardened by battle and betrayal. The barbarian queen wore no crown. Instead, a pelt of a Dravorian war beast hung over her shoulders, its skull serving as her shoulder guard. Her eyes were storm's twin embers, glowing with purpose. Beside her rode Captain Irag, his body etched with ritual scars and armor, pieced together from the bones of fallen enemies. Behind them trailed 20 of the fiercest warriors in her command. All shared the same grim purpose: reach the ancient temple before the cursed blood moon rose. The structure finally emerged from the earth like a beast unearthed, half buried by time and guarded by towering stone sentinels. It wasn't just old. It was older than old, its architecture alien even to Elizabeth's well-read mind. Massive columns carved with spiraling symbols rose skyward. The stone door, partially ajar, oozed warmth like a living thing. "This is it," whispered Irag, dismounting. Elizabeth dismounted too, and stepped forward alone. Her fingers brushed the stone, and suddenly the carvings flared golden veins pulsing beneath the surface. A chill ran down her spine. The temple recognized her. It welcomed her. Inside, the air grew heavy. The walls glowed faintly with forgotten energy, revealing paintings of a time before kings, before war, before even the first barbarians walked. Images showed a queen bathed in flames, ruling not with sword, but with something more powerful, the Vox Ignis, the voice of fire. Legend said it could command minds, shift landscapes, even pierce the void between worlds. At the heart of the temple was a chamber circular and vast, lined with columns that hummed with a low, resonant frequency. In its center hovered a crown-like artifact, twisted metal alive with flickering flame. The Vax IGNI stot. As Elizabeth stepped forward, something stirred in the shadows. A guardian. Tall, skeletal, yet wrapped in fire, as if it wore flame as armor. It didn't speak, it simply lunged. Irag and the guards burst in behind her, steel clashing against inferno. But the flames consumed them like paper. Elizabeth roared and grabbed a fallen axe, swinging with feral strength. Still, the guardian advanced. She bled. She fell. And then, as her hand brushed the base of the hovering crown, the fire entered her. A scream, a flash of white-hot light. When she rose, her hair floated in the air like smoke. Her eyes burned not with rage, but with command. The guardian knelt, smoldering, and the flames receded like a tide obeying its queen. The Vox Ignis had chosen her. The crimson banners of Queen Elizabeth fluttered like wildfire in the wind, their embroidered lions snarling against the charcoal sky. From atop the jagged cliffs of Grather's spine, the queen stood, her red hair whipped back, gleaming like liquid ember. Below her, the valley of Verinder burned. It had begun at dawn. The sun had barely crested the distant iron maw mountains when the shrill horn of the barbarians echoed across the plains. A sound that didn't signal an attack, it signaled defiance. And to Queen Elizabeth, defiance was a language she knew all too well, and punished without hesitation. Grather's spine marked the last stronghold of the Darnok, clans a patchwork of stubborn warriors who still refused to kneel. Their fortress was crude but dense, chiseled into the stone with obsidian ramparts and spiked walls formed from the bones of the dread horses they worshipped. Elizabeth rode at the head of her elite guard, the Flameborn. Unlike the fur-clad, muscle-bound warriors they faced, Her troops wore plated obsidian armor, etched with runes of old armor that pulsed faintly with the energy of the forge gods. She wielded not a sword, but a glaive called ashvein, forged in dragon fire and quenched in the blood of a betrayer. Strike without mercy, she whispered, voice low and steady, and burn their legacy to cinders. The battle began with the sky itself darkening. Her pyromancers ignited the air above the Darnak walls, raining streaks of molten wrath that turned wooden towers into bonfires. The barbarians, screaming ancient oaths, charged into the storm with axes and war cries, but Elizabeth was not merely a ruler. She was a war god in flesh. She met their chieftain in the open field Kur Vasker, draped in furs and wielding a hammer the size of a man. Their clash cracked the ground. Kur struck with brute force, but Elizabeth was wind and fire, dancing through blows with a predator's grace. She spun ashvein in a blur, slashing at tendon, cracking bone, drawing blood with every move. Finally, with a cry not of rage, but of duty, she drove the glaive clean through his heart. The silence that followed was unnatural. No cheers, no cries. Only wind and ash, and the distant moan of the dying. She stood over Kur's body, not as a queen of diplomacy, but as a monarch carved from war itself. As her troops began gathering the wounded and burning the dead, she walked alone to the edge of the battlefield. There, amidst the scattered shields and the scent of scorched iron, she planted her banner deep into the earth. Let all who passed this place know, Queen Elizabeth ruled not by claim, but by conquest, and this was only the beginning. Beyond the spine, rumors swirled of darker forces gathering. But for now, Elizabeth would march onward her path soaked in blood, her eyes set on dominion, and her heart locked away beneath a crown made not of gold, but steel. The air over Cinderlon grew heavy with smoke and dread. From her war tower, Queen Elizabeth of Dartha watched the crimson horizon as the dark shapes of the mourned host gathered like a thundercloud at her gates. They came not as raiders or scattered rebels this time, but as an army with purpose. And at its center was Kelrith Varn, the exiled sorcerer king, whose blood feud with Elizabeth dated back to a betrayal carved deep into both their pasts. The queen stood tall, her red hair tied back, with leather bands braided like ropes of fire. Her armor was blackened steel, forged from the bones of fallen tyrants, etched with glyphs in the old language of flame. Beside her stood her most trusted general, Igmar Stonehelm, a hulking brute with a mind as sharp as his axe. We have 3. Days before their trebuchets reach within range, Igmar growled, eyes narrowing. They march under void-like banners. Kelrith intends to break more than our walls. He wants our gods to bleed. Elizabeth gave a faint smile, not of amusement, but of readiness. Then we remind him why we are not a kingdom, but a crucible. She descended from the tower, passing her soldiers barbarians of Dartha, battle-scarred, draped in furs and steel, each pledging their life to her, not out of duty, but because she had once bled beside them in the snows of Varnak. She was not merely their queen. She was the flame they followed into the dark in the sacred vault beneath her throne room. Elizabeth retrieved the blade of Agril, a sword older than the stars above, its edge forged from the spine of a void dragon. With it in hand, her very presence sang of war. When the first stones from Kelrith's siege engines smashed into the obsidian walls of Cinderlon, the sky screamed. Dartha's warriors held fast, archers atop the battlements returning volley after volley with black-feathered arrows. Boiling tar rained down on the enemy's front lines as hornblowers signaled for the outer legions to fall into the flanking valleys. Kelrith, mounted atop a beast born of ash and sinew, raised his skeletal staff and called down a torrent of corrupted flame. Entire towers crumbled. But Elizabeth was already moving. Clad in war paint, Astride her war-bearer Aurochs, she surged into the chaos, leading the elite Vardron guard. Her blade sang death, carving through Kelrith's shadow beasts. With graceful brutality, she fought not as a monarch, but as the incarnation of Dartha's fury. In the thick of battle, Elizabeth and Kelrith locked eyes across the ruin-strewn courtyard. She charged, leaping from Aurochs' back mid-gallop, her blade clashing with his staff in a thunderous crescendo. The two titans clashed beneath the burning moon, their blows lighting up the battlefield like divine sparks. Kelrith hissed, blood seeping from a wound Elizabeth had opened in his side. Still the savage queen. He sneered. And you, she spat, still the coward who let his own kingdom die to feed a god he couldn't control. Their duel twisted the very air around them, and when the dust cleared, Kelrith was gone, retreated into shadow, his army broken but not destroyed. As dawn crept over the ravaged city, Elizabeth stood on the scorched stones of her courtyard, drenched in the blood of both friend and foe. Her people gathered in silence, wounded but unyielding. The siege was over. Cindralon still stood, but in her heart, Elizabeth knew this was merely the first wave. Kelrith would return, and next time, he would not come alone. The victory at Cindralon had scarred the city like a burning mark on soft flesh. Its walls held, but its spirit was fractured. Queen Elizabeth walked the shattered streets at dawn, her boots crunching on blackened stone and ash, the scent of smoke lingering like a bitter memory. The red sun peeked hesitantly above the horizon, casting long, trembling shadows that seemed to whisper warnings only she could hear. Her crimson hair, once a flowing banner of war, was now tangled and streaked with soot. The weight of the blade of Agril hung at her side, its edge dull beneath the grime of battle. Yet her emerald eyes burned brighter than ever, sharp, unwavering. The battle had been won, but the war had only begun. "Your Majesty," came a voice, rough but steady. Captain Idmar Stonehelm approached, his face a map of bruises and fatigue, but his gaze fierce. "The scouts have returned. Strange things stir in the ruins beneath the city." Elizabeth's brow furrowed. "Beneath the city?" Egmar nodded grimly. "The old tunnels, ancient catacombs from before even the barbarian clans settled here. Our men heard whispers, saw shadows move where none should be." She paused, the murmurs of her people rising faintly behind her. For centuries, the catacombs beneath Cindralon had been sealed tombs for forgotten kings and traps for the greedy. No one dared enter them. Until now. "Prepare a detachment," Elizabeth ordered. "We will descend into the darkness ourselves. If Kelrith's forces are regrouping in the shadows, we will meet them on our own terms." At night, under a sky veiled by smoke and stars, Elizabeth led a company of the fiercest warriors through the narrow entrance to the catacombs. The air grew cold and thick with the scent of earth and decay. Their torches flickered, casting eerie light on walls, etched with ancient rune symbols of power and protection, but also of warning. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the silence became, until it was shattered by a faint, rhythmic pulse, a low thrum like the beating of a heart. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber where the air shimmered with a strange, unnatural heat. At its center lay a pool of molten crystal, glowing with an inner fire that seemed alive. Elizabeth stepped forward, sensing the presence of something ancient and terrible. Then, from the molten depths, figures began to rise, creatures forged from ash and flame, eyes glowing like embers, their forms shifting between solid and smoke. The Ashborn guardians of the old world, bound by magic long forgotten. "Stand your ground," Elizabeth commanded, raising the blade of Agril. Flames danced along its edge, responding to her will. The battle in the cavern was fierce and surreal. The Ashborn moved like living firestorms, their touch searing flesh and bone. But Elizabeth's command over the Vox Ignis surged within her, turning the flame against them, bending the wild inferno to her purpose. With each strike, she carved a path through the burning specters, her warriors following with axes and spears forged from star metal. Yet the deeper secret of the catacombs revealed itself, not just ancient guardians, but a buried power beneath the molten pool, the heart of Varner, a source of primordial energy that could alter the fate of worlds. As Elizabeth reached the heart, she felt its pulse sync with her own. Connection that whispered of both salvation and ruin. But a shadow fell across the chamber. Kelrith stepped from the darkness, his eyes aflame with malice. Did you truly believe you could claim the power of the ancients without consequence? The cavern trembled as the queen and the sorcerer king faced each other, once more this time. In the very crucible of creation, Elizabeth tightened her grip on Ashvane, her voice steady and fierce. I am the flame that will cleanse this world, Kelrith. And you are the ashes I will scatter to the void. The battle beneath the ashes had begun. The chamber trembled with the fury of unleashed power. An ancient furnace awakened after centuries of slumber. Queen Elizabeth and Kelrith stood poised in the heart of the cavern, their wills locked in a deadly dance. The molten crystal pool behind them pulsed like a living heartbeat, its glow casting flickering shadows that writhed like specters on the obsidian walls. Elizabeth's breath was steady, her emerald eyes aflame with determination, ashvane in hand. She was both a queen and a tempest, a force of nature born from fire and steel. Kelrith, clad in obsidian robes etched with runes of voidlight, smiled with cruel confidence, his skeletal staff radiating dark energy that twisted the very air. You seek to wield power beyond your grasp, Kelrith hissed, voice like grinding stone. The heart of Varner is not a tool, it is a god, and gods demand sacrifice. Elizabeth's lips curled into a fierce smile. Then let me show you the price of betrayal. With a cry that echoed through the cavern, she surged forward, ashvane blazing with molten fury. Sparks flew as the blade met Kelrith's staff, the collision ripping through the silence like thunder. Around them, the Ashborn guardians howled, their fiery forms swirling in a tempest of flame and smoke. But neither combatant faltered. Kelrith's magic writhed and struck like serpents of shadow, seeking to bind Elizabeth in chains of void energy. Yet her mastery over Vox Ignis, the ancient flame within her blood, ignited with renewed vigor. Flames leapt from her fingertips, weaving around Ashvane, forging a sword of pure fire that cut through darkness and despair. The battle was not merely physical, it was elemental, primal. Fire clashed with shadow, light battled void. Each strike sent shockwaves shaking the cavern's foundations. Elizabeth felt the searing heat of her own power threatening to consume her, but she willed it to serve her, not destroy. In a moment of fierce clarity, she dove beneath Kelrith's guard, driving Ashvane deep into the molten crystal pool. Heart of Varner responded instantly, its glow erupting in a blaze of blinding light that engulfed them both. When the radiance faded, Kelrith lay shattered, his form dissolving into embers scattered by a violent wind. The Ashburn collapsed, their fiery essence returning to the depths from which they were called. Elizabeth stood alone in the silence that followed, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and rebirth. The heart of Varner pulsed now beneath her feet, its power coursing through her veins. She was no longer just a queen of barbarians. She was the living flame of an ancient legacy, a harbinger of a new dawn. But as she raised her gaze to the cavern's entrance, a whisper echoed in the shadows, a warning that the crucible had only begun to forge her fate. The cavern's molten glow faded into the first light of dawn, spilling through cracks in the stone like a promise reborn. Queen Elizabeth stood atop the fractured altar where the heart of Varner had once pulsed, a living forge of creation and destruction. Her armor bore scorch marks, her fiery hair wild as the winds that whispered through the ancient halls. Yet, in her eyes shone an unyielding fire, tempered by sacrifice and victory. The battlefield beneath Cinderlawn lay silent, the echoes of war replaced by tentative hope. Her people gathered, battered but unbroken, beneath banners singed by flame but vibrant still. Elizabeth addressed them, her voice ringing with both command and compassion. Today, we have burned away the shadows that sought to consume us. But the flame within us, the flame of Dartha, will never die. We rebuild not just our city, but our future, together. Whispers of awe and resolve spread like wildfire. In that moment, Elizabeth was not just their queen. She was the living embodiment of their survival, their wrath, their rebirth. Yet beyond the horizon, in the silent void of space, distant stars pulsed with new mysteries. The heart of Varner's power had awakened forces older than even the gods dared speak of. Forces that would test the flame of Elizabeth's will and the strength of her people once more. But for now, the embers of a new dawn burned the bright dot, and the Queen of Flames watched, ready to face whatever darkness might come.